This Week in Action.
Well, how's our guest?
Yes?
Could be something.
Talk to the developers.
Are you playing with my emotions?
Let's get sad and then
Too good to be true.
That's not what they did here. When's the money going?
what other horror stories can come with this?
We love Tencent.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Action Podcast 43. My name is Aaron, owner and operator of the YouTube channel Action RPG, and tonight we have a special show. Tonight we're doing something different. Tonight, I think you are in for a treat. With me, as always, is two of my leaders, my friends, the people that truly run the channel, Daft and Guilty. Say hello, gentlemen.
How you guys doing tonight?
Hey, yo!
And as you could see, we have somebody else with us. A newcomer, some would say. Steve from 11th Hour Games. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Hi guys, I am Steve. I'm one of the marketing leads here at 11th Hour Games, and I'm excited to be with you.
Awesome. Steve, before we get started, before we talk about what the show's going to be like tonight, why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about your background, as far as gaming goes, as far as where you've worked, and maybe how long you've been with 11th Hour Games and your role.
Sure. So there's like a fun story about specifically me and Last Epoch. So I kickstarted the game, years ago when they did their very first Kickstarter.
Love it.
Because I'm just a huge fan of the genre, ARPGs in general, and Judd posted his "Who wants to make an ARPG together?" and I saw that Reddit post and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna follow these guys, whatever it is they're doing, because I was just kind of excited about that. And so Last Epoch released into early access and I played it and I was very excited about it. And I had been the marketing director for a couple of companies over the last decade. Most notably, I was the marketing director for a disc golf organization, one of the larger manufacturers there. And a friend of mine who works at Riot Games, who I won't name, was like, hey, I know you've been trying to get into gaming. You should go check out Last Epoch. They just posted that they were hiring for a marketing director. And I was like, really? Like, that's interesting. And so a mutual friend kind of reached out in between us and put me in touch with the hiring manager there. And they told me, I sent them my resume because they were like, hey, can you, send us over your details? I sent them my resume and they said, your resume looks really great, but we just don't think you'd be a good fit. And I don't want to say I was offended, but there was a big part of me that was like, wait a minute, what? Like, I'd be a perfect fit for this job. Why would you, how could you say that? So I emailed the hiring manager back.
Maybe they're sexist. Maybe that's what it is.
Right? Yeah, I definitely can't hire men. And I genuinely was like, I wonder like what was in my resume. So at that point, it was less about like, man, I really need this job. Because the other job that I had was fine and I was just doing an interview, but it was now that I couldn't get one, I was like, I got to find out. So I emailed him back and I said, can I have 10 minutes of your time and we can talk about, myself and my work and what I do and what I could bring. And if you still think I'm not a good fit, I'll never contact you again. And the hiring manager was like, interesting. Okay, yeah, let's do that interview. So we get into the interview and he gives me 10 minutes. And at the end of those 10 minutes, I said, what do you think? And he was like, I'm gonna be honest. He was like, I'm very glad you emailed me back and said this because you are a great fit for what we want. But I wouldn't have thought that, before meeting you. And I remember being like, great, could you tell me what it was about my resume that turned you off? And he was like, yeah, you didn't have anything about video gaming on your resume at all. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, we're looking to hire people who understand the genre more than just like guy who's good at marketing, right? Because I am guy who's good at marketing.
I do think that's fair, though. Like, you need, if you're going to be the marketing director of an action RPG game, you need to be somebody that is obsessed with loot.
You need to be someone who's very intimate with the genre and its player base. Like, you really need to understand that because the RPG genre is a very niche, unique genre and how players interact with the game. And so he was completely correct. It just had not occurred to me ever in my professional career that I should say, oh, sure, I've got 3,000 hours in, Diablo, and I've got 2,000 hours in Path of Exile, and I've got like that's not a thing that I should, ever put on a professional
resume.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
basically,
so in hindsight, I absolutely should have said, yeah, I've got like 1,200 hours in your game already, and that would have been great. But I didn't say that, so shoot myself in the foot from the beginning.
Steve, since you said that story, and we now know that they turned you down, and then you went and got the job. If things go south, now we're gonna know that they made the right decision first. So,
I told my boss that the first time. Actually, I said, "Listen, if this doesn't work out, you can always say we tried to not hire you in the first case," and then I convinced them to do it. But I guess the reality is that should be proof of the pudding that I'm a good marketer, right? Like you said,
that is
no,
true. You marketed yourself so well that you got yourself the job. That's awesome.
That's right.
And thank you for being here. I just want to start the show by saying that we didn't reach out. Steve reached out to us, which just shows that, as a marketing manager, as someone from 11th Hour Games that cares about the community, he wanted to be a part of this and wanted to be here to voice some frustration or be able to answer some questions from the community as far as frustration and things that are happening. So, just want to put that out there. He wanted to come on. I don't know. Maybe
you guys, your last podcast, you voiced some like legitimate concerns or questions, right? And I am a huge fan of being like, yeah, let's talk about that. Like, there is never anything wrong with having complaints, especially when they're legitimate, right? You should never like shy away. Oh, that's not us. So I was like, yeah, I'd be willing to come on and talk with you guys. That'd be great.
No, this is awesome.
Great.
Fair enough.
So what we're gonna do is, and I don't want it to be like, 20 questions, like everyone goes through and you just get bombarded over and over again. Like that's not fun. I want to be able to have a conversation. I want to be able to talk through some things, talk about the current, the future of the game. What are some thoughts around it? We'll take questions from the community. Daft, I'm hoping you could keep an eye on chat, and if you see a question come through, just kind of raise your hand or jump in. And I am gonna start with the first question. Okay, this is focused around a hot topic. All right, you probably know.
It used to be a fun store, then malls closed, so yeah,
right.
Nobody goes there.
I am gonna give a little bit of backstory, and then I'm gonna give the question. So there was a time before time in Last Epoch, which you probably know about, that we were gonna get the bazaar, and the bazaar was gonna be this trading hub. Okay. And it's actually really interesting that I feel like the community at the time was split. Some people are like, that is so stupid, don't do it. And the other half is like, ooh, I love that idea. It's like kind of a revamped D2 style of trading. And ultimately, that ended up getting scrapped. And that got scrapped 11 months ago. And so far, we haven't heard a whole lot, which leads me to the first question. In the latest dev update, you stated we'll be releasing a deep dive, or 11th Hour Games stated we'll be releasing a deep dive blog post focused on trade in the near future. When will this blog post happen? We've been hearing that it'll be coming soon for a long time now. Any specifics would be greatly appreciated. Trade. It's been 11 months. All we know is we're going to have some form of party trade in multiplayer. The floor is yours, sir.
So there's two parts to that conversation, right? Because you asked me, when are we going to get more info? And then you said, let's talk about what that info could look like. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that soon, it's interesting because in my old job, soon TM was also a joke. And then I learned apparently soon TM is a joke, like in the Last Epoch world.
Yep.
And so I kind of enjoyed that because I have old shirts that just say soon TM on the back from, again, the old job. And I jokingly was like, I should wear some of those. And then they were like, don't.
Yeah.
So,
oh, good.
When they say soon TM, what negatively would happen if they told us?
What do you mean?
Like if they said, hey, this is what we're working on.
Oh, sure. Well, so there's, again, this goes back to, there's two questions in his original question, right?
And you can
First
answer,
one is,
and if it's a different answer, talk about trade before Guilty's question.
No, that's fine. So it's a dual-sided question, and Guilty's question goes along with it. So previously, Last Epoch has had a lot to talk about because their timelines for development were less around the specific patch direction and more about the content of the patch, right? So like right now we're building toward patch 090, and that has a very clear delineated, this is the multiplayer patch, and the scope that we have coming for that patch is there.
Yeah.
Previously to that, patches were less about like this very specific scope, right? And more about like, here's the content of a single thing that we're working on, and then here you go. You know, you had Sands of Ajasa, which was like a really big patch, and that was amazing.
Right. That was the most popular the game's ever been.
8.4.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
084.
Absolutely. And that's an example of working towards a specific patch with goals in mind. And so when we talk about like, couldn't we just talk about it yet? Part of that rolls into that there is a specific scope that the lead developer who's in charge of this has in mind. And they want to make sure that it is exemplified correctly, and that it works, like that their idea could potentially have some semblance of like, we think this is a good idea. Here's the testing we've done. Here's what we like about it. Before we say, here's what we're going to do, because that's scarier than here's an idea we want to try, right? Not people don't generally like to hear, well, here's an idea we're going to try with something,
Right.
even though that's what a true beta is for. Like,
Yep.
even though if I were a player and a company said, we want to try this new idea, would you guys be cool trying it with us? The like vast majority of gamers would be like, yeah, that sounds awesome, especially if you're a fan of the game. The problem is that like in groups, the negativity would start to float around of if it wasn't good. Like people, you know, the naysay, the oh, woe is me, this is all we're going to get. Like all of that would start to bundle really hard. And the proof is in the pudding of that is more likely than people being willing to like have a reasonable conversation about something they don't like and listen to and let the devs say, great, we'll change it. Because that is literally the thing about Last Epoch and 11th Hour Games that drove me here, was that the devs are like very willing to be like, yep, we didn't like that, we're going to fix it, or we're going to change it, or, you know, someone point out how we could do something better, and nobody internally like take offense that a random fan pointed out a better way to do something. And we just say, yeah, that's a great idea. Like, let's put that in the game. Because you have to remember, 11th Hour Games exists because somebody said, who wants to make a game? And a bunch of people said, yeah, I'm down. So we listen to the voices of people who say, like, I'm a person from your community, but here's an idea I have. Because everybody who works here was just a person from the community who said, here's some ideas that I've got, and also professional experience in the background. So we never look at those ideas and say, oh, no, we can't possibly do what the community said to do. That seems to be a common thing when companies get big enough, right? They start going, no, 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 that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do this because it may be safe, or we know how to do it, or any, you know, number of reasons, right? So in a two-part answer to your question, we haven't gotten the blog yet because they are still adding to it in ways that they want to like exemplify that information. And the second one is that's why they wouldn't just say, here's what we're doing, because it would be partial. And we're in a stage in development where partial information, if perceived incorrectly, will be the decision, because every vocalization we make now is hyper criticized. Like people are really, really anxious for that release. So we have to be timid.
Yeah,
Would it be fair to
right
say that portion of the game is still an alpha?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I'm saying yes, because like the people who are testing it are the closed group of people, right? So you know, beta generally implies like it's more widely known, that people may or may not have access to it. And so I couldn't say it's a beta because like not everybody who's accessing our current beta has access to it, right?
So let me jump in. Let me jump in for just a second. So Kane is the community manager and you're the marketing manager. So I'm sure you guys work pretty close with what's going out, what's getting posted, what's happening in the community. So like, I guess what I struggle with a little bit is it's been 11 months since it's been scrapped, and it was publicly stated that we're getting rid of the bazaar, but don't worry, we're going to give you something better, right? And that's actually what was kind of stated, like, hey, we've been thinking about it, you're going to get something better. And then, you know, I would think that after 11 months, the communication of what that better is going to be would be, I mean, that's got to be solidified, right? I mean, the forward trade system has to be like baked for what's going to come in 1.0 or 0.90. At least I would think, right? I mean, I've never made a game. I don't know. I'm just looking
So-
at timelines from previously 083, 084, 085. There was a really nice cadence, and that was one thing that 11th Hour Games always got tons of credit for, was super small studio, and they're just, you know, crushing larger studios as far as what's coming out. And I think that's part of the frustration. It's like, man, like what happened?
yeah.
You know, like even from communication wise. So that's what I was just wondering, like trade, huge topic. Even I'm not asking for a date, but it's like, hey, you'll know in a week, you'll know in a month, you'll know the week of 090. I'm wondering if you could give kind of a roundabout for when that would be communicated.
Sure.
Prior to it,
So there's a couple of questions / statements in there, right? And I'll do my best. So the first one being that cadence. One of the reasons why that cadence was also so easy was because the studio was smaller. And so I'm not going to say it's because their scope was smaller, but it's because there was actually significantly less people to gather information from.
Okay.
Like there were maybe 2 or 3 people working on that one thing. Now there's like 12, right?
Yeah.
The studio is more than doubled in size in the recent year. And with that comes, I mean, there's just like things that you never have to even think of, like having an HR department, needing project
Right.
managers at like a higher level, like needing interdepartmental communication. Like we now have departments. Before it was like, everybody kind of worked on all of those things. We have like an art department and we have a music department and we have, and so that comes back to like, so I'm in charge of like posting on socials and stuff like that is one of the things I do for marketing, right?
Okay.
And I'll post like art caps recently. That's a thing that like I've been showing a lot of our
I
concept
retweet
art.
all of them. I know, I always see them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
our concept artists are amazing. Whatever those bone sculptor things are horrific.
We've had them on. We've had them on. They're great.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And so when I post that, right, you'll see that myriad of comments of like, why are you showing me art instead of working on the game? And those comments are nonsense because like the guy making the art is not working on any programming related to the game whatsoever. So like we have a whole art team working on stuff, right?
He's
There's
doing
a
his
reason
job.
why I haven't posted any MTX being worked on, because the only comment would be, why are you making MTX instead of working on the game?
Mike
And
has
it's like,
already
you
said.
realize-
Mike has already said that his
True.
focus right now is MTX, so that's already
Correct.
out there. But yeah,
Correct.
go on.
Like you realize the people working on that are not the people working on solving the problem that you want solved, right? So like they're completely separate divisions or departments or whatever. And a certain amount of reality says that like it used to not always be that way. And so, that is a part of it.
But that shows the community's frustration, right? We don't care about art. Like, show us the game. You know what I mean? I think that just
But some
stems.
do,
That's
Aaron.
my
That's-
argument.
It's the whole thing. They've been trying to upgrade the art in the game, all the 2D
Right.
art, all the they've been doing that. So there are those who like that because they're the ones who are the
Right.
Path of Exile style and the Diablo, and they need that fix as well. The gameplay is what we look for, but
Mhm.
they're both
Well,
important. So
They are both important on launch.
yes,
Yes, correct.
on launch.
So that's a part of it, right? So the first part is that cadence is the company had a significant growth like in the last 6 or 7 months.
The growing
Bad
pains,
part is
basically.
that is with growth comes like training and management and build up
Yep.
and so it doesn't mean everything stalled, but it does mean like a lot of the people who are involved in the communication have either like shifted departments, or we had a couple people leave, like other people came on to replace them.
Right.
And so things did get shuffled around. And then about that time we were like, okay, like we're starting to kick back up into gear, but with a much larger team now. Certain areas ramped back up, one of them being communication. So, you typically see Kane doing a lot of our development blogs, but what that is it's a combination of the marketing department helping write and every one of the developing departments contributing to Kane putting it all together, right? Because you got, stuff coming from every area of the company, and somebody has to take it and put it into a cohesive message. And Kane does a brilliant job doing that, by the way. But now there's even more people who have voices to add to the content, and there's more people to reach out to. So it does take more time. Like it just,
Right.
there's like literally more people to communicate with, instead of it being like one guy who's like, hang on, I'm doing all of that. Let me tell you what I'm doing on all of those things. And now there might be 6 people working on those different things, and so you got to communicate with each one of those people.
So
in terms of timing, so I do want to answer the question.
I was just going to ask a pointed question, and then we could move on. And
it's okay. You asked me, when is a dev blog going to come out for this?
And I don't want this to be like he's a day late. Like, I'm not asking for a specific date, just trying to help the community understand on when we can possibly expect it,
general expectations.
Like, it's not I gotcha.
I'm gonna say words that are specific, right? Because I'm the marketing guy, and knowing what I'm saying is a part of my job, right? The goal is before the end of this week, right?
Really?
Yes. That does not mean that it might happen, because there are some decisions still being made that could delay it.
Sure.
Boom!
Right.
I like that.
The goal.
Right.
That's a good goal.
The goal.
Right.
Yes.
Wish you guys well on that.
Yes. To be completely honest, we did have to trade. Ended up getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Like the actual development blog about it ended up getting bigger and bigger, and we had to make the really hard decision of, do we take that chunk out of the most recent development blog that you just saw us do? Because it started to get big enough that we were like, this is going to derail the conversation of what, like, our roadmap. Because it's really going to, like, split the conversations, and that gets really muddy. Like, it's better communication-wise to have your communication centralized and themed. Like, you can understand this digestive chunk because it is about X, right? And so originally it was going to be tacked on, and then we were like, no, we should explain a lot more. Like, we should go into detail. And so as that detail grew, we were like, okay, this needs its own dev blog. And so we had to kind of make the 11th hour decision to pull that chunk out.
Well, I'm gonna say what I always say to Mike when I watch his Friday streams. Steve just confirmed that this week trade is coming.
Trade double confirm.
Dev blog.
I'm gonna write on a napkin over here the rest of the time that just says hopefully.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's great. Obviously, for everybody listening,
it's good hope.
We're gonna know about trade soon. Awesome.
If I'm not here tomorrow, you'll know how much BS I had.
I'd be like, oh, he's gone.
Notice. Steve let go.
So, in regards to the bazaar and trading and all that, that's fine, and it's good that we might hear about it soon. Hopefully, that's the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, like, on launch, what's your goal for marketing? Like, what does marketing look like at launch for this?
God. Yes. Okay, step 1, I talk a lot, right? Congrats, I'm a marketer. And generally speaking, that also means there are too many ideas. So in marketing, we have this term called activations, and that means a specific thing that I want the market to do, whether it's I'm doing it to the market or I'm requesting it from the market, right?
All right.
So let's talk about players as activations. Generally speaking, you can only ask people to do things so many times before they're just gonna not do stuff. Like, just being honest. Even if they're invested in that thing, right?
Right.
If you like something and you're invested in it, and I say, go click a link, go sign up for X, show up for Y, they'll do that, but only a certain number of times. And the number of times that they'll do it varies wildly for all kinds of different reasons, right? There's even numbers out there that say, like, you shouldn't ask a consumer or a player to do something unless you give them something 12 times before you ever ask. You'll hear numbers thrown out like that in the marketing world. Most of it is a bit hogwash, just a lot of pseudoscience that people kind of latch onto because it sounds cool. But the reality is that, me saying this, you naturally go, yeah, I'm only willing to, like, click stuff so many times for you until I'm like, what are you going to give me now that I've clicked all this stuff, right? And so companies try to minimize generally the amount of times that they ask you for something. And so for us, our leading up to Own I Know marketing comes with those 4 activations that you saw. Essentially, we have our invitational beta, right? We have our crash the server party. The goal is, literally crash the servers if we can.
Yeah.
My server manager hates everything about that statement, and everybody else laughs and thinks that's funny.
It's good.
Yep. And then we have the open beta, which is terrifying. And then we have Own I Know, right? And so the goal there is activities and rewards. And so I kind of brought that mentality to this and was like, listen, when we ask people to do stuff, we should be very nice and say, thank you very much. Here you go. So there is going to be some activities and rewards.
Cool.
Yep. On top of that, I'm a huge fan of and I'm just gonna throw like MTX is both cool and easy to do generally. So I like that idea. Twitch drops are both cool and easy to do.
Yes.
I don't like Twitch drops that are like watch for 32 hours and we'll give you coins or something like that's obnoxious.
And then someone leaves their computer on and walks away and
Yeah, well, I mean,
we're all doing it. We're all right clicking the
all
tab and clicking mute, so it still counts us as watching it. But we're
in
not
Lost Ark, I did it. I would go make
No,
dinner.
We all did that in Lost Ark.
And you'd have to watch like 2 hours, I think it was. So whatever.
Yeah. One of the worst ones I got involved with was you had to watch, but then you had to click a button while you were every so often while you were watching, or it it was.
I haven't
miserable.
had one of those.
Oh
Hey,
God, I hate it. I'm
horrible.
glad that it's not trending because even as a marketer, I hate everything about that. Sure, retention goes up,
hey,
but it
Daft,
just builds people who are
What's that?
upsetting you.
their crash the server 10,000 player one is they're doing like a Wolcen launch. They want to see if
Mhm.
you're gonna do a soft Wolcen launch. That's the plan.
We're not
So-
doing that at all.
That's what the
We
plan
don't
For
is.
need
those of you that don't know what the Wilson launch was like, it was like
Ah.
logging into nothing.
Hey, to that being said, Wolcen had
I mean, we could call it the Diablo 3 launch and
127
just be more respectful.
127,000 players logged
Yeah.
into Wolcen. That is,
It is true.
And broke their server.
Yep.
they
Yeah.
broke the
And-
game. They I think
and
it
then the
melted
game
or
broke.
something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
I've got a kind of question. I guess it's really more of a statement. So prior to this podcast, I asked for questions, comments from the community because I just didn't want it to come from me. I wanted to see what other people said. And what I'm about to read, somebody has already said in chat, and these are different people.
So you talking about Rich?
No, yeah, what Rich said, but this wasn't from Rich. What I'm about to read.
Okay.
So Steve, you talked about the studio growing, right? And you kind of had that small, kind of more intimate studio, and now it's ballooned, probably over 100 people working there. The person wrote, "My worry lately is they are moving away from their community-friendly vibe, and their communication honestly hasn't been what it used to be. Wondering if this will be a trend or a one-off, but it doesn't feel like a one-off because they did it a couple of times before." And it is interesting
3 or
that
4.
it did feel like, before communication was, there'd probably be some edits and problems with, it was just I don't know. It was almost, if the communication wasn't perfect, it almost came across more human, and I don't know how to explain it. But now that the studio's larger, how do you maintain that community friendly vibe? I know it's not really a question. It's just kind of a statement.
No. It's a valid question, actually. In fact, it's something that. So when you get to be large enough and you start planning things, like large releases, right? You start talking about are you doing all of your own marketing? Are you hiring people to come in and do marketing with you? You start wondering if the guy you're talking to on social media is a company or if it's actually a dude. Spoiler alert, it's me every time. Maybe Judd sometimes, who is, the lead for the entire studio.
Yep.
And those are the ways that we talk about that. Like a good example, we all know a streamer by the name of Quinn, and I was in his Discord earlier asking to talk to somebody on his management team, and people were like, "What in the world? Why are you in here?" And it's there's a difference of being absent, right? Removing yourself from those daily activities and being a part of those daily activities. So I'm going to give a really kind of accurate real world example, right? Right now, when people have a question about development, a lot of people can just go straight to Mike and ask him a question, not even on stream. They'll just get into Discord and specifically ask Mike a question, right? And I had to have a conversation that I was like, we don't want to lose that, but we also need you to be developing the game. And so what we have to do is section out spaces and times for that, right? But how do you say, okay, well, now that I want you to focus more on this, you are actively taking some of that interpersonal communication away, right? We have to backfill it. And so you backfill it with more people. So whereas before you might have only heard from 3 people at the studio, or what you said was the Power 5, right? There are now more people at the studio who are able to talk. And so therefore we just have now more people who can represent the company.
And I think most people would say, oh, Mike is the marketing manager and the community manager. I would think people that don't.
Not anymore.
But most people that probably don't follow specifically this game, it's like, oh, Mike is the face of the game, right? I'm sure it's been that way for a long time. Yeah, look, he's in Guilty's background on our cup we made.
Yeah.
Steve, you want to be on a cup too? We can make that happen.
I think I'm on a shirt over there for my old work. That's not, I've been on cups. But no, so the answer is yes, right? But it comes a time and point, and like this was the same thing that I said internally. Do you want to be a community manager? Do you want to be a developer? Do you want to be what thing do you want to do? And when you say, well, I want to do all of those, I'm going to say, great, you're going to be good at none of them. Like you'll be barely keeping it together if you try to do all of them.
Fair.
When you have to do it at scale, it's always about scale.
Yes,
When you only get a couple
scale,
hundred people in your live stream, it's not difficult, right? And to a certain degree, this goes back to like negativity in the space. Something that I preach, it's a stressor for a lot of people, right? Is that growth should come with more negativity. And people say, but that's not true. Growth should come with more positivity.
That's true.
No, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
Imagine in an amazing world where only 1% of our fans are upset about something. And to be completely honest, like in the world, that's a number that marketing uses. Like it doesn't matter how good you are. You could be literally the next coming of God. And 1% of people would hate it no matter what. Even if it was, I'm going to make all your wildest dreams come true and everything would be great. 1% of human beings would just be like, I hate that. So it doesn't matter what you are, 1% of people will hate it. So if you look at that 1% number, when you have 1,000 fans, right? 1% is not that many people. Right? You go, oh, okay, cool. That's like a thing that I can handle because it's only a few people, right?
Yeah.
When you have 10,000 fans, 1% of people starts to feel big. When you have 100,000 fans, 1% of people is a lot of voices, especially when they sound off all at once, and it can be very stressful because generally speaking, people are more apt to sound off when they are angry than when they are happy, right?
Right. They're content. They don't do anything.
Correct. They're happy. So of course they're going to go and enjoy the game and not complain about it.
But right now, if you have hundreds or a couple thousand and you hear a majority, that means it's a lot more than 1%, right? Because the people that have stuck with the game, it's almost
now
like
I'm getting to
it's like the spillover, right? It's like, okay, we put up with it. Now it's like we're upset.
No, so now what I'm getting to, what I'm getting to is when we talk about that scalability, it also happens for us internally, right? If Mike wants to go out and talk to the community, when he's talking to people, now he's talking to like a few thousand people at any given moment at a time, right?
Yep. Right.
That conversation takes more than just a few minutes, right? So it's a lot more effort involved in making that conversation happen. So you have to start talking about scalability. So this comes back to, we have always been about how can we grow as a company, but not leave behind the fact that we want to be super community focused. And so one of the to answer your question of, how are you guys going to make sure that this lull doesn't happen? One of the things that I preach internally is as much communication as possible externally. So weirdly enough, there was a lot of fear when I joined that people were like, oh no, this will be a gatekeeper, someone to say like, you can't say that, or you can't talk about this, or I need to review X or Y. And I'm actually kind of the opposite. I'm in the background like, oh, you want to say stuff? Yes, go say stuff. Please, please, please say stuff. Go talk to people because that's fine. And I put up this entire huge thing about like, if you want to talk on behalf of EHG, here's just like Steve's quick tips about how to not say anything that you'll stick your foot in your mouth. And then that's it. And I was like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't freak out if you say something erroneous, because like, that's just kind of human. We're all going to do that. And so I don't have any fear of that either. Like, I'm not trying to gate anybody from talking to the community.
So we do have one question that actually kind of lingers above all of them. And
sure.
Our community has the same question, Rich and a few others.
Yep.
I'll read Rich's comments. It's like, I don't know if you've seen the numbers lately, but you would be hard pressed to find that many people talking positive about it right now. And my question is, would you like to address the letdown of pushing back the 0.9 patch to March?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of that at all.
Been a big community boom, like downer for the last couple of weeks.
That's the main thing.
No,
Yeah.
totally. And honestly, like that was to be expected.
They,
To give you an idea,
they knew it was coming. They knew it was
yeah, of course. I mean, let's talk about that frustration, right? Like the four of us sitting here are all professional people, and we're also gamers, and we're also human beings. Like,
Right.
we had a conversation internally of, if we do this, people will be upset. Like, we just knew that was going to be the case. And so some of that even went into our marketing planning of like how to release that information. Because I said, when we announced that the date is March 9th, people are going to be mad. And I said that the day we say that is not a good day to also say, here's a cool dev blog about all the stuff we've been working on, because all that dev blog is just going to be full of angry, upset, right? You gotta say, I'm very sorry. Here is a piece of bad information. Don't also say, but here's all the good information, because no one will hear that. They won't even look at it.
Space them out.
It'll be
It'll get completely lost in the ether. Right. Well, and not even like compliment sandwich, because like that can be disingenuous. And that was something that's very important to me. I am against disingenuous marketing.
Okay.
Because I like, we're human. Like, 30 years ago, people might have fell for those tricks because you wouldn't have expected somebody to do them, right? But like, kids growing up, like younger kids now, are way more emotionally mature when it comes to advertising than we were at that age, because they've just been bombarded with the worst of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're not even gonna, like, it may have worked by doing it one way that one time. It's not gonna work like that anymore. And the honest answer is, it was disingenuous then, you should have been doing it, but it worked, so people did it, right? The answer is that we needed to communicate some bad news. And so we were like, let's let that news fall. Let's not apologize about it. Let's not try to, like, muddy it up or something like that. Like, let's just say we know this is the way that it is. Let people be upset, because they deserve to be upset. They have every right to be upset. We internally were absolutely working our butts off to try and get it out before the end of the year. And we had to have exactly that conversation. Should we just get it out before the end of the year, given what we knew were things we didn't like, right? Should we just do that? Because there is a certain amount of, go ahead and put it out there, and then, like, batch and patch kind of on your way, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can fix some things. And we had that conversation.
Quick question for you, Steve. When, if you don't mind, did that conversation happen compared to the news?
Yeah,
was
fair.
it like relative a week, 2 weeks, a month?
It happened in like 3 stages. Because there was like a chance that we release like Q3, like end of it. And then there was a chance that we were going to do it in Q4. And each one of those times came with its own problems. And so we were trying to be super optimistic of, okay, well, let's solve that problem, and then we should be able to get it out, right? And then let's solve this problem, and we should be able to get it out. And it's, there's that joke, right? Like, you fix one bug, there are now 2 bugs.
Yeah.
Where, like, some of that was still like, there are problems happening, and it is better for us to say, hold up, like, let's pump the brakes. We stepped back as an entire company and said, this is everything that we want to go into 090 that we think represents 090, at least good enough that we could be proud of it, even if it's buggy, like, even if we need to patch it along the way, right? And we were like, are we happy doing it? And I'm just going to pick an arbitrary date, but, like, let's say December would be the last Thursday in December, the middle Thursday, the 15th or something, like whatever this one is, it's coming up, right?
Yep.
The 9th. Would we be okay releasing like December 9th, for instance, right? And we sat down and we looked at the roadmap, and it was like, the answer was combinations of maybe, we hope so, but, right? And those buts were things like, but we would need certain employees to be on call during the weekend, during the holidays. Like, just no, plain and simple. It was going to be like a certain amount of you, we're going to ask you to work on the weekends and through holidays. And there was a certain amount of, and it would need to be kind of in like rotating groups, right? Because, like, you're going to have to work these normal days, but then you'd have to work these weekends. And we started going down that rabbit hole, and pretty soon the big C word was coming up, and everybody was like starting to get a little stressed out about the word crunch.
Yep.
And we started having the conversation of, are we the kind of company that is okay crunching, right?
You should be.
We should be, but we should be the right kind of crunching. We shouldn't be the kind of company that turns around and says, I know you had holiday time scheduled that you were going to take off, but instead I need you to work.
No,
that was
I do it by choice.
Some of us don't want to be at holiday-related events. I completely understand that.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in. I'm guessing that September, the studio was confident on 2022. There's no way that it's like you're gonna go on Ziz's stream and say, "Hey, we're shooting for 2022." Like, you would not publicly state that. Not that it was saying you're gonna do it unless you were pretty confident. What I don't understand about the crunch part of the conversation is, hey, people are taking time off. Hey, it's Christmas. Hey, it's the holidays. We're not going to have people actively on call during that time. I think that's a totally fair assessment. So then why isn't it dropping like, you know, mid-January? Like, why not right after the holidays? Like,
3 months is a big
right, because you can say, hey, we're not going to drop it during Christmas. That's not fair to our staff, so we're going to drop it third week of January. You know, like, I'm trying to understand where March came from.
It did come out. Like, the conversation was, should we drop in January? And actually, we got a lot of advice from a number of like third-party advisors that we work with that were like, don't drop in January. That's a literal terrible month to drop a game.
Oh, so okay.
Hang on. It's not the full answer, right? Yeah. But we got advice. They were like, don't drop in January. Like, that's just not a good month to try and launch a new like title, because 090 is going to be like a fairly significant launch, right? And our own history with like Majasa also shared in like, you know, how much we kind of lost out on like a rough release window time frame about people who might have played, but they were busy with insert X, Y, or Z, like games that you receive during Christmas or new activities or things that you get during the holiday season. You know, there's a certain amount of people that are shifted into that focus. So that was a piece of that. The other piece was things like, well, what are the things that like, because we were getting to the point where we were like, okay, do we take out anything from 090 in order to work on that stuff to then ship it, right? And so as we started going, okay, well, if we're thinking maybe not launch in January, what can we add back to 090 that would be worth that extra time to enhance the experience, right? And there were some elements that we were like, this is honestly a piece that we were like bad about having to possibly remove. Can we add that back, right?
So feature creep almost started to like, what can we cram in with a little extra time?
Yeah, correct.
Certainly feature creep.
But being really careful of scope creep and feature creep, because that was also top of mind, right?
Yeah.
And so there was just a lot of conversations there.
Yeah.
And those conversations were very fruitful. Those conversations went really well. We all felt, you know what, we know that some people are going to be frustrated about this, but we do think that with the longevity of the business, this is the right answer, because we're not planning on releasing 1.0 and then being like, cool, dope, next game, let's see it. Like, we've got cycles planned, you know, we've got like the game is designed to exist for a while after that, intentionally, like many years of content for Last Epoch. Just in the same way that, you know, Path of Exile has done things.
Is that like an ever-growing campaign or other things added around the game?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Fair enough.
But the answer is the ever-growing part. I can say yes, absolutely. Like, you know, how many like Grim Dawn is a great example, right? They like Grim Dawn like packaged and released a singular player experience, and then they were like, cool, here's a whole bunch of content add-ons.
The best ARPG.
Here we go. Here, don't bring up Grim Dawn to guilty. Hey, Daft.
I have no problem with Grim Dawn. Grim Dawn's great.
Daft, can you read Lone Star's question? Daft, can you read Lone Star's?
Yeah, I saw a question in there that I wanted to answer. Tilly asked one as well that I'd like to answer too.
Lone Star was
and
first. So
Rotten Gamer did as well.
Yeah, we'll go to Lone Star first.
All right, so here's Lone Star's question. So the explanation about getting communication kind of got confusing. Does that mean we can expect more interactions from the developers going forward, or is that going away? Was the basic gist? Which side of the coin are we going to continue it with the old meta of devs, or are we going to start to, you know, be introduced to other people that represent the team?
Sure. So the answer is yes to both of those. So the devs are still going to answer things. For instance, you mentioned specifically Trisaki in your comment piece right there, right? Like, he's working on the trade manifesto right now.
Okay.
And so like, no, my marketing style internally is I actually want to exemplify the voices of the experts without
Okay.
taking their voices away. So I generally, like, if you go into the, like, you can't, but like if you would to see into our art Discord, I literally ping the artists and say, hey, do you have something you would like to say about this art piece? Right? And some of them are like, yeah, I'd love to talk about it. I'm like, great, because I'm gonna quote you if you don't mind. And some of them are like, no, I don't want to share my thoughts. Right, correct. Yeah, like some artists are great to talk about it. Some artists are like, no, I just draw cool stuff. Like, please don't, like I don't want it. And that is perfectly fine. In the same boat, like some devs are like, listen, man, all I did was do X. I don't, I don't want to like share it with the community. Meanwhile, I'm in the background going, I like that our bears have goatees. Like, that's awesome. Do you want to explain that design decision?
I like bear goatees as well.
Oh yeah, no, trust me. There's some models that just came out, and I was like, these bears have goatees. Spoiler alert, that's fantastic.
That's going to be an interesting segue because I have a question later about bears.
So, to answer McFluffin's thing, I, whenever possible, try to encourage the people internally to speak. So if they have something to talk about, I am generally trying to get them to talk about it.
Okay.
Now, I help support them. So a lot of times we're getting to the point where I can't say, hey, you person, take 3 days and write this manifesto, right? So instead what we're saying is, give me the details that you need to communicate. Kane and I will help communicate some of that. We will give it back to you and say, are you okay saying this, right?
Yeah.
That is one way that it has been communicated. With the dev manifesto, it's been the other way around. Trisaki writes the thing, and then I come in with Kane and say, spelling and grammar check, and then like we call it good, and move on, right?
Right.
And the goal is to continue to do that. You're also going to hear other voices. There are now new people, and I'm trying to get those people as well. You're also going to hear my voice. They hired me to talk for the company and as the company and to do stuff with the company. So be prepared. I'm also real nosy. I like getting into our developers and being like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
You should.
You should be involved in that.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, they show me, I'm such a nerd when it comes to ARPG stuff. Like every time they show me, I'm like in the candy store, like awesome. And then I'm in the background saying, I'm allowed to show this to the world, right? And somebody's telling me like, no, Steve, you can't just share everything on socials.
That's what Mike goes through.
No.
Mike just gets sent stuff to show on his Friday streams.
Well, and the honest answer is that like usually there's like a big list of things, and he's like, I want to show this one and this one and this one and this one and this one. And Kane is like, you can show these.
Yeah.
And I'm in the background like, you can show more. And Kane is like, you can show these. Because we still need to have stuff to talk about later.
All right, Guilty. You want to go through Tilly's question?
He was just below McFluffin.
Yeah, it's do
Also, how
you
did
think
McFluffin
a
realize
post
that
similar
thing?
to what Judd posted on Reddit this past Saturday should have been accompanied by the multiplayer release date news to help appease players frustrated by the constant delays and possibly soften the blow of the announcement, which you kind of already answered in the previous answer.
And
But
Daft
there
and Guilty, I don't know if
could
you
be
guys
more.
saw it, but Judd basically put out like a, hey, we're just as frustrated as you. We're really sorry. He made like a fairly personal Reddit
Little
post
reach
on,
out. Yeah.
on what's happening.
To be fair, he didn't tell you it was going to come. He said the goal
Right.
was this.
Okay,
And,
being someone that has covered the game for 3.5 years and watched every stream and made over 330 YouTube videos, I can tell you that 99.9% of the community thought it was coming in 2022. So whether it was stated that, hey, they never officially said it, like it was implied for years. We actually thought it was coming in 2021, to be fair. But anyways,
Yeah, it's been pushed back multiple times. But
honestly, that's so. To be fair, so anyways, that's the question.
So to answer that question, first to Tilly. Hi, Tilly. I love your little digest in our forums. I'm assuming that's the same Andrew Tilly. So
it is.
No, it's fantastic. I like what he's doing actually quite a bit. Seeing what he's done, I wished I would have done that at like some of the other companies I worked at, having kind of a collaborative, like this is where you can find all the info. I like it.
Yep.
And also I've used it. I've been like, have we put that out yet? And I go to his post and look at it. And,
Nice.
So to answer the question, yes and no. So there was a second part of his statement where he said, because to some that post felt reactionary. And that's a two-sided coin. So the first one was, to many. No, he said because to some that post felt
Yeah.
Yeah, and too many, sure. It's a two-sided coin. So the first one being we meaning myself and other people in marketing crafted that statement specifically to give people the information that was relevant to answer the question and let them be mad. Like we knew that they were going to be mad. It didn't matter what we said. We could have apologized that moment all day. It didn't matter. And we knew that. And that's okay. Like big emotions are okay. I'm actually like, it's flattering that there would be people that are upset about a game release.
That is a positive way to look at the negativity.
Correct.
It is. And it's true too.
It doesn't mean that you should discount it. Like their concerns were very valid. You are upset, and I can't tell you how upset I was either, because it would sound like pandering, but like, yeah, I was also real upset because I'm like, I have a dozen friends ready and waiting in the wings to go play this game with me too.
Not to mention again, your job, having to talk to people like that.
Correct. I've followed this game since day one. Like I'm one of the biggest proponents of like, let's just ship it out there in the world. So, but that being said, it doesn't detract from the fact that we had a statement to make that we knew was going to be frustrating. And so we were like, rather than try to pretty up that statement artificially, we were like, let's make it. So then we had the second, coming a few days later, like after you've been able to be frustrated, but now you're ready to like have a conversation. Because generally speaking, the first thing you say at that frustration is reactionary. And then like, once you've had a chance to sleep on it, you're more willing to be like, let's digest and have like an actual conversation. You can get into a dialogue with people. Because the dialogue is way more important, especially when there are those people who just want to troll no matter what it is. And that trolling can really frustrate an actual dialogue. Like, we want to communicate with you. If you're just going to shout nonsense back at us, it makes it really hard to communicate. So we'd like to communicate with you.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah. And so we waited a couple of days to let that second statement come out, because then we could actually, like, the forums wouldn't just be full of this is BS. It would be like, okay, cool. I like what you said here. I don't like what you said here. Even if every ending sentence was, I'm just real pissed off that it's delayed. Like, we get that, but at least you were cognizant enough to write that top part that was very helpful and actually had something worth communicating about. Because I'm okay with that bottom part too. Like, that is valid. The frustration was valid.
Yeah.
So to go back to, because it felt reactionary, it was. When if I give you bad news and you yell at me and say that's garbage, right?
I mean,
if I said, well, I already said I'm sorry in the bad news, it doesn't help, right? Like, if I come at you with an apology before I deliver the bad news, and I don't let you process the bad news, my apology beforehand holds no weight whatsoever. You didn't even
comes off as excuses.
Right. Correct.
Like that. Yeah.
Correct. So if you're like, it sounded like he was just reacting to negativity, there needed to be a time and place for him to go in and say what he said. Right.
That leads into another thing. The false thing. We have another comment from Rotten Gamer. It's like, what's your thoughts on the release so close to a possible? I'll add in the possible D4, either a beta or a release. Now you choose to release.
Now the new leaked date for D4 is June and not April. So I will say, I got a feeling Steve saw that very likely
Insider news.
090 will have 3 months to breathe for multiplayer over Diablo
reference
dropping.
To 1.0.
Oh, then yeah, I can't.
Then 1.0, yeah.
I'm going to answer that question twice because there are two versions of that question, and I'll answer the 1.0 one, right?
All right.
So people would say, why in the world would you launch at that time, 090?
Right.
And it's a two-sided question. So the first one being is North Americans are not the only market. And so it is very important to make sure that you are cognizant of that. And China does what's called Chinese New Year for like 4 weeks, right?
Yes.
Smack dab, like end of, January straight through February.
Yes.
And so it's really like you don't release a game during a time when a giant chunk of your market won't play it. That's a bad idea. We are also planning on translating the game into languages at 1.0, but there is still a significant amount of people who are wanting to play the game in other countries in other spaces.
That
Now
leads into what will launch look like at 1.0 for non-Western markets. That was actually one of my questions.
Oh, perfect. And I'll get to that too. So there was a reason why it wasn't like, why not 090 in February if we thought April was going to be the Diablo launch, right? And the reality was that the March 9th was the soonest we could launch. That got us away from giant chunks of time when like servers would be unavailable because that company is shut down for New Year. Like there are just giant chunks of infrastructure that are no longer available in the digital area during that period of time. And so it's just generally a really bad time to also try and launch something, unless you're specifically planning an event around it, right? Like
Okay.
Blizzard does, some New Year's festival every year for Chinese New Year.
Right.
I think one of my favorite ones was like the original Overwatch. They had a Chinese New Year, like league thing for Overwatch, and it was a lot of fun. And so, we talked about it, but that March 9th date really worked. And then we internally had some inkling that April was going to be the Diablo 4 launch. And there's a school of thought here that I want people to recognize. We're still pretty much an indie studio with like indie studio level budgets, right? So it may shock some people that I don't have as much money as Blizzard to spend on marketing.
Okay, so there's another question I had. Tencent purchased a maybe substantial part. We were told less than a quarter.
Yeah, not
The
even
company
close. Not even that much.
Okay, all right.
Much less than that. Way much less than that.
All right.
I'll get to it. Yeah, way much.
Tencent's not buying you guys commercials.
Oh God, no.
Okay.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, that kind of clears that up because we were told less than a quarter.
I feel like
it is less than a quarter.
Technically, it is.
Less than a quarter.
So it's not 24.99.
So basically, you didn't want to crunch for December. You were told by whether it's outside consultants or whoever, don't drop in January, can't drop in February. So March was the most logical, and that at least gives you a month before D4, which was going to drop in April. So that's the overarching breakdown.
That was some of the logic. That is a very good pathway to that logic. You are correct in the ways that you got to that thought. There's way more nuance internally with that.
For sure.
But yes.
Okay.
And then the other side to that, though, is that there was the conversation of, do we launch this before D4 or do we launch it after? And the conversation internally was, no way do we launch after. Like, no way do we do 090 after. It has to be before. That just seems like a failure on our part if we end up launching 090 after D4. We all internally had that conversation. It's still been a driving part of the conversation of, no, like, we think that if we're going to be able to put information into people's mind space about we're an awesome ARPG, it's willing to give us our time, we need to do it before Diablo 4 drops.
Yes.
They're going to dominate the market space for a while.
Yes.
We know that. Everyone else knows that. We're not ashamed to say that. Like, we're not on the same... Our game may be as commanding and respectful of your time as a major release like that, but we just don't have the market share of that, right? Like, we don't have all of the proof in an industry. We don't have, people who have 3 other games under their belt coming back to our game, right? Like, we don't have Last Epoch 1 and 2. We don't have a failure of a weird little game in between, and we don't have like 4 other games.
Weird little game,
right? And so we there is an amount of space there where we have to be realistic, right? Blizzard's going to dump tens of millions, hundreds of millions into marketing for Diablo 4.
At least,
it's going to be an absolute machine. And so we have to say, this is a Horton Hears a Who scenario. We are an infinitesimal speck, right? And we need to pick our moments to shout, we are here. Because all the noise is just going to be the elephant that is Diablo 4, right? So we have to pick our moments very strategically. And so we were like, listen, that March 9th date might give us a moment to basically make one little burst onto the scene when people are very hungry to play an ARPG, right? You won't be able to play D4. The vast majority of players will not be able to play D4. If you are able to play D4 as an open beta, it will be some form of limited play option. So you won't be able to fully satisfy the desire to play the game. So we were like, that's really a good time for us to release if we're going to get out before D4, because we can essentially, as the rising tide raises all ships moment, where we can't try to advertise against Diablo, but what we can do is pick like one weekend and put a lot of time and effort and money into that weekend and make a lot of noise, right? And some people go, ooh, like, I'm interested in Diablo. What is Last Epoch? Like, you know, they're actively paying attention to everything Diablo.
How would you,
Hopefully we
what
show
would
up.
that look like?
Wait,
that I
you
can't
guys
share.
making noise.
So before,
I
yeah.
am under some pretty serious NDAs at the moment.
No. That's totally
we
fine.
understand.
My plans in place.
We understand.
But the answer is, we are very confident in the ability for us, if you are actively looking for ARPGs, anything, doesn't matter if it's D4, Path of Exile 2, you could be Googling for Titan Quest. Like if you are actively looking for ARPG anything around that time, when we want to activate, we're confident in our ability for you to at least notice us in some way. And this assumes you don't already know who we are, right? Like if you're brand new to the ARPG scene and you're like, I just want to play Diablo 4, but I can't yet. During that time, you should be able to hear about us at least enough to go, if you're waiting to play Diablo 4, we're just as good.
Let me jump in. No, let me
have as much money.
Yeah, Aaron.
Let me jump in for a second. I will say, Steve, and you don't need to elaborate on this. I remember a time, I don't remember which update it was. PoE was struggling with their launch and their servers were a nightmare and people couldn't play PoE, so they jumped over to Last Epoch. So there is something to be said about, you know, who knows, a AAA game that could have 1 million players, how that would work and people getting frustrated with that and maybe leaping to something else as well. But I want to jump into a question.
Sure.
You don't even need to comment. I want to jump into this question. Any planned surprises for 090? And obviously I've watched everything, I've read everything. Is there anything that's going to be like, oh, I didn't know about that? Anything that'll surprise us?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yes.
We've kept some stuff under wraps. Part of that, like I said, when I ask you to do a thing, I'm a big fan of rewarding you for it. We have stuff planned. And it is, these are thank you for helping us plans, right? Because like this has been an adventure for like an entire community of people. So this is definitely not like a, you know, you need to do X or Y in order to, you know, participate kind of deal. I'm not trying to do that.
Awesome. Next question.
Very good.
I love that. Is there going to be content patches in between 090 and 10?
It's a question that has gotten asked a lot, and at this point, I don't have an answer that I can share.
Just
because
wink,
the answer is not no or yes yet.
Just wink and a nod. Okay,
There was a nod and a wink. What does that mean, though?
I like
Can you tell us
sneeze
what
and
that
blink
means?
at the same
Well,
time.
you know,
So that-
I guess an alternative question to that is, once 090 drops, with the exception of the 3 masteries, what would be left? Obviously, you got bugs, you've got multiplayer stuff that comes on, you've got server stability, you've got balance, you've got finishing skills, like all the stuff that we know about. But with the exception of really that big elephant in the room, the 3 last masteries, that there's nothing left, you know, unless scope creep kicks in and now you're adding a whole bunch of other crap before 1.0. So I guess in my mind,
doing that, are you?
We know that the masteries are coming at game launch, which means once we get multiplayer, other than the polishing, I don't know what's left.
So the first thing is that multiplayer is more than just multiplayer, right? Like if you've been keeping up with those devlogs, there's a lot in multiplayer.
For sure.
I mean, there's overhauls of entire spaces, you know, there's like graphical and performance updates. There may or may not be system-wide updates, right, or mechanical updates. And so I can't tell you what all is going into 090 right now, but what I can tell you is that any of it that doesn't make it to 090 is planned to go into 1.0. These are kind of our, like, you know, basis of, like, what is what does 1.0 mean and what does 090 mean, right? And we have a minimum viable product for each one. What would we be willing to say we're happy with to ship at 1.0, right? And say, done. Like this constitutes a final game. And what wouldn't we be able to say? And we're not going to ship until we're ready to say that 1.0 part.
What's the minimum viable 1.0?
You can't see.
I'm not gonna tell you that. I just told you I'm not gonna tell you that.
But I'm pretty
Because
sure,
whoever doesn't
Steve.
make it into
Tell me with
one.
mime it out to me.
I'm pretty
Mime it out to
sure.
you?
I'm pretty sure Mike
Sure,
has
I'll
said.
mime it out to you. Whatever doesn't go into 090 that we just end up pulling away will go into 1.0.
Ooh.
Okay,
How
not-
mimed
Heard it here.
I understand.
You heard it here.
I understand you can't answer. Okay.
Right.
I'm just making it public record that I'm almost positive Mike has stated that there will not be any additional endgame systems coming for 1.0. Now that could be different.
I
That
don't
could
believe
change.
that there are.
Okay.
I don't. I believe that Mike
We
is
heard
correct.
that.
Yeah.
No
Okay.
new, but maybe revamped.
Sure. So
Yeah.
if there's,
I mean,
so
there is
again,
always a chance that we redo something or that we enhance something, but like I don't know of a new dungeon or
exactly.
something like that.
So
Like,
again, this
right.
is just me inferring.
and if I did, I probably wouldn't tell you on the stream anyways.
This is just me inferring that knowing
next
what I
year.
know and playing the CT and know what's coming to multiplayer and knowing that the masteries drop at 1.0, other than polishing, I don't see what that gap is. So I don't, that's right. Obviously, you're gonna finish the 3D renders, you're gonna ensure it's balanced, you're gonna finish the skills, but I feel like the leap from a stable 090 to a ready 1.0 isn't a long time in my head.
So, question: the cause for the delay was not your visuals, was it?
No.
I didn't think so.
No. Have you seen some of our visuals from the early parts of the game? We wouldn't delay something for visuals.
Exactly.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Shiny
if
Carl
they- if-
Urban
if
was my
that thing that
favorite.
popped out and went raw or was real blocky, we'd be like, listen, half of these textures are still kind of blocky in some places. We're okay with that.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so it's safe to say it could be like back end stuff. Hypothetically,
I know you want to pull out of me answers. I'll use an example, right? If you watched like Ziz's stream, there was like a weird bug that was going on that like while you were playing in multiplayer, if you alt tabbed during a transitional zone, like it would just crash.
Yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah.
That's one of those things where like that's a hypers feel bad for multiplayer, right?
Right.
There are certain things that can't happen when you're
that's a
trying to play
Bethesda
with a group.
launch.
Say again?
That's a Bethesda launch.
Yeah, I mean that's a I mean what was that error? 50 something error, 477 errors or whatever. I was one of those people that took 4 days off for that game and only got to play one of those days. So
Okay, next question. Will there be... That's so many damn questions. Will there be leaderboards for 090? 090? If so,
Yep.
how will they be determined for parties? Like example, are there leaderboards for like 2-party, 3-party, 4-party solo? Or are you in a party but you're only getting tracked solo? Kind of general question.
at the moment, I think the discussion is still out.
Okay.
Because of some of the questions you just asked being handled, right? Like, how do you handle, like, if a party was trying to boost somebody, right? Like, how do you account for that? What is the metric for that?
Which
Or
we know
so
is going to
you
be possible.
separate it.
Like, we know we're going to be able to go level 1 into the monolith with the party if we want to. Which is going to be awesome.
Yeah, they told us that.
Like I said, there's some weird thing like that is still jury's still out as to whether or not that'll be a thing because
Oh no!
some of the will happen at 090, right? Because some of the conversation has to be things like, I mean, do we have to separate the leaderboards into like based on the number of people that were in your party during like a whole period of time, right? Or because, you know, does it have to be separated based on like if your character ever joins a party, is that character now a party leaderboarded character? Like that's a hard.
But I think
Hire an economist.
But that's
Oh,
honestly
gosh.
the answer. Like solo self-found.
David wants to
Has
try
their
some of that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are all fair. Good answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any official races, events, competitions planned for 090 and or you know something along those lines, like cool rewards like they do for like PoE. And normally people are looking, and I think this is, you know, kind of what we were just talking about. It's almost like
yeah.
solo self-found has its own, and then there's everything else, right? That's normally the best kind of way to do it. So any competitive stuff planned.
So please understand that this is not a cop-out question. is an intentionally designed answer, right? Or my answer's not a cop-out. Because it's going to sound like one on the front end, but let me get all the way through it before you jump in, right?
Because, I'm ready to jump in. Go ahead.
Good, perfect. I prefer not railroading communities. Because when you give a community tools and availability and say we want to work with you to make stuff that you want, you end up with Warcraft 3 customs and basically an entire generation of games. Like, that's what happened, right? One of the smartest things they did with that game was they were like, here's the engine, go. And like hosted the servers for them. And they just kind of let them do whatever they wanted. So let me get all the way through.
Creation engine.
He said don't jump
there's
in.
Not a creation engine coming. The point that I'm making is that like when you don't kneecap a community by saying, here's what we're gonna do for you, you give them the chance to flourish. And so the opposite to that is me actually going to the community and saying, EHG would love to work with you to support you on the types of community events that you want, right? Because we actually have a great community right now. Maybe they don't get as much focus because unless you're looking for them, it's kind of hard to find them. But that's something that I want to fix. Like our community already does community events, right? So rather than EHG goes away from those people that have put in the effort and the time to like run a boss kill event, for instance, right? I would rather go to the people who have been organizing these and say, yo, if I give you prizes and support and put you on the website and, you know, encourage streamers to promote your community race, right? Like, are you willing to run it for us? What can I help you and give you to make that a little bit more viable? Because the reality is like, there are people out there who are very willing to help you with that and do that. And they probably can do it better than like I could put resources to it without having to like hire a community race events team, right?
No, I can jump in. I do hear what you're saying. Like Vision GL used to run a weekend tournament every single weekend, and the community would race, and there'd be certain things you'd only use these skills or this weapon. So you're saying instead of doing something,
I watched those a ton before I ever worked here, by the way.
So instead of doing something internally, you would support them through marketing and all that type of stuff. Okay.
Right. And that way it's theirs. Like, because, and it should be theirs, right? You know, like Zizarin has his gauntlet events that he started and he ran, and then PoE was like, well, crud, why don't we just advertise these for you? Because they're cool. Right. Like, I don't want to take that. That would be rude to just jump in and take it away. Right. So instead I can go, what can I do to help you and support that thing? Because that's awesome. Like, that's what I want to do. And so to not make it sound like a cop-out, the answer is that if the community comes to me, by the way, my email is super easy. It's steve.h@11th Hour Games. If you're like, yo, I'm a community manager for X, or I do these community things, or you can hit me up at EHG Steve. Like, I'm in the EHG, or I'm in the Blast Defunct Discord. And you're like, we run a community thing, or I want to run a community event, or I've run community events, or any of those things, I'm in. I would love to come up with some community activations with you for between 090 and 1.0, because I don't want to just say, here's what we're going to do, get in line, right? Yeah. So I am genuinely hoping to have all of those like planned out. So if you're listening and you watch this and you're like, oh, I might want to do that, you should hit me up sooner rather than later so we can start making plans.
EHG's Discord's posted in the chat. Go ahead and join, talk to him.
Yeah, perfect. Hit me up.
Nice place.
100% okay thing, because I would rather the community have those things for themselves than like us artificially prop them up. I'd rather just support them. You know, if they disappear for some reason, like, let's say the people who were doing it previously decide they don't want to do it anymore, or it's just not their thing, or, you know, then we can either reach out back to the community and say, this was the thing that happened, we liked it, does anyone want to take it over? Or maybe we do have to just, you know, revitalize it ourselves. But generally speaking, I'm a believer of communities will, more often than not, communities are not hindered by your own operational needs, so they'll come up with something better than what you were thinking.
Yeah.
Like, it's usually the case. I mean, they're like, we could talk into the night about the amount of video games that have literally been created because of that. I mean, PUBG exists as a game because that guy made a game mode within the rules. He didn't get his own creator mode. He just had a rule set for his game in the end. Yeah. Right.
No, that's cool.
True.
Okay. Cycles. You're already thinking, oh, I can't say anything about cycles. This is a community question. When do you expect more solidified plans for cycles, aka seasons, in the future? PoE has a well-established seasons every quarter with lots of content. Diablo 4 seems to be going the same direction. Can we expect similar meaty updates every 3 months, or is 11th Hour Games thinking about going a different direction? Now, before you answer, we've heard from developers in the past that 11th Hour Games cannot wait until they are forward focused, which means they're not replacing old assets. They're not finishing skills. Like, the game is complete and now they can focus on the future. So I guess really the question is, once the game releases, once we're forward focused, can we expect a team the size that 11th Hour Games is now to get out that content every 3 months or whatever cadence?
Sure. So the most important part to that question is really cadence, right?
Yeah.
Because like even Chris has said that a 13th week turnaround is just insane stress. I have no idea how the Diablo Immortal team is doing the seasons that they're doing.
Don't talk about Diablo Immortal.
There are so many of them, it's not even funny.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I genuinely, I couldn't, like, I was getting, like, by week 2, I had emails in my inbox of join us for the next season. And I was just like, whoa, like, what in the world?
Well, probably outsourced that stuff.
No. I mean, Steve, you probably know this. There's always 2 teams, right? So they're always working on 2 seasons, and then they leapfrog each other so that's how they get the cadence, right?
That's
even Bungie used a separate team to do like visuals for their games. It's
so cadence is the question, right? And there are a ton of examples in the market of how cadence fluctuates. But something that is interestingly unique to ARPGs is how modular and shifting groups are. So it is okay in the ARPG space for players to like go away for weeks or months at a time and then come back to your game for a new season or cycle, right?
That is like, that's literally the current action RPG community, right?
I can tell you that that's actually unique to this genre, like pretty heavily unique to this genre. How like developers don't panic when their game goes like 3 to 5 weeks after a league launch, right?
That's because PoE sells 200,000 packs and they got their money to supply.
It's I don't even
$600 skins, man.
I think it's a difference between the growth of the video gaming industry, right? Because back when you only had D2, you could play D2. Back when you had no D2, you could play Path of Exile or Titan Quest but like you're seeing more and more games become games as a service. So it's not about, did I play that game? It's about, am I currently playing that game, or am I going to go back to that game for that season, right? And so gamers are getting into this cyclical nature of, I'm going to play this for a couple of weeks, then I'm going to play this for a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to play this for a couple of weeks. And we're getting to the point where we already like know what this looks like. Like we're going, okay, there's going to be a league for this. I'm going to play these 3 weeks. Then this other game that I'm playing is going to launch or have a league, right, or a cycle, and I'm going to play that cycle. And then this game is going to come out, and I'm going to play like that league or cycle. And so we have always envisioned ourselves as having a accessible game with lots of rewarding complexity that sits somewhere between Path of Exile and Diablo, right? Like you don't need a 4-year university degree in order to be able to play the game.
No.
But it's not so easy to pick up that you kind of don't have to pay attention to what you're doing. We want you to be able to like think about it and make meaningful choice, but we don't want that meaningful choice to like ruin your entire experience if you chose wrong, right?
No, skill system in Ellie and the crafting system for me is what was really what made me fall in love with it. Crafting, skill system. I still want a reset button on passive.
We were promised the reset button,
which Judd promised me.
I'm in the same boat. I want a reset button too. Don't feel bad. There are other people.
We'll do it for free.
I agree with you. I think that the crafting system in Last Epoch is one of the best ones I've ever interacted with, especially now that we have the legendary potential crafting system. Oh my gosh, I like that. I was stoked when that came out too. I went in and crafted a whole bunch of things on characters that I'd had that I was excited for.
But would it be pretty safe to say without obviously holding it to you and as a like maybe, that we could expect cycles every 4 months. I feel like forward
I'm not able
focused.
to answer at all about a timeline, and the only reason I'm saying that is because we haven't solidified whether it's weeks, months, days, years.
That's fair.
Right? Yeah,
That's
and,
very
like,
fair.
and a part of that goes to, like, you're also asking me what's going to come in those cycles and what are we going to complete in those cycles, and then how long will those cycles last? Because a part of that is also how long does it take you to experience all of that cycle, and what does it look like, right?
Right.
The Path of Exile
Big part
kind
of
of
it.
set the standard for what leagues look like in the ARPG space. And so I'm real curious to see what Diablo 4 is going to do based on how they're kind of going to this open world situation. Right. And like, again, like there's never been as many ARPGs in the space, right? So like, we're getting to the point where everybody's kind of borrowing ideas from each other. If you played Undecember, for instance, right? Like Undecember has
We all did.
Diablo 3 loot goblins in it. It has Path of Exile, like currency expenditure on chests.
Right.
It
On
has
everything.
like Undecember was like, let's take the best of them and slam it into this game. And I wasn't mad. I was just shocked. Like it hadn't occurred to me that the ARPG genre had gotten to the point where we're all kind of like sharing amongst each other for ideas, but the good ones. Like, because I'm not mad about chasing a loot goblin around, but like it was a literal Diablo 3 loot goblin with a sack over his shoulder, right, in Undecember. And I was just like, whoa, okay.
The reason why I jump in and say 4 months is because I just look at historical content from LE. Prior to 085, you go 8, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. It was almost clockwork. Any 3 to 4 months that would drop, and that would be a content patch. So knowing that historically a team of 30 to 50 people that is now ballooned with a larger budget and 10-cent money to over 100 would be able, when forward focused, to be able to hit that same cadence. So that's where I came.
You're asking a question that has like a supposition answer to it, right? Where you're saying, I would think that you'd be able to, but that also depends on whether or not that's what we choose to do, right?
Sure.
Like, what if instead of our cycles being true cycles like Path of Exile, where it's content that we then like remove the content at the end of the cycle and kind of like pick and choose which pieces maybe go core? What if none of that happens, right? Like, what if our cycles are completely independent situations, or the other way around? What if our cycle is just essentially a core update that has mechanics for that cycle, but then it goes core the moment the cycle comes out, right? So we don't know whether or not that is a solidified answer. And because of that, we don't want to marry ourselves to the idea of having to like force that decision until we're ready to make it, right?
Okay.
Well,
yeah, that's good. That's totally fair.
What if we came out with a dungeon that was a part of a cycle, but we don't want to gate that content behind seasonal cycle characters?
So
right?
it just goes into standard.
Right.
Correct. So like it would be, but again, that comes to other games have already set the standard. And so when you ask me questions, what you're really asking is how do they relate to the other thing that we know, right? And I think it's very important that Last Epoch stay true to doing the game we want to make, because that has been at the forefront of, we're a bunch of ARPGers who wants to get together and make an ARPG, right? And so we're trying to make sure that Last Epoch feels like an ARPG that you know, but is its own ARPG.
So it would be fair.
We might take some good ideas from other people, but we don't just want to like take a carbon copy of what someone else has done and put it over the top of it.
You don't want to feel like you're going to the mall.
But you would, but I think it's fair to say that, so then cycle communication, whatever you're doing with it, that communication would be dropping in between 090 and 10. There's no dev blog potentially planned prior to March 9th.
So what I would say, there is no cycle dev blog planned, but that doesn't mean that there won't become one. And that is something that I want to make sure is really key, right? Okay. Like implying that we wouldn't tell you that information, I think is a negative, because once we make decisions that are locked in and there's no barriers to that decision existing externally, like we just plan to talk about it. I think the biggest problem is that multiplayer as a scope is awkwardly large. right? And Last Epoch was a game that designed itself around solo self-found play, and then was like, okay, we designed the entire game around this. And then later, we were like, we need to add multiplayer. You know, Mike has said on stream a couple of times, like, if you would have asked me, you know, what we would have done first, they would have said we would have made it multiplayer to begin with, because that would have, like, the headache involved in
my Christmas tree analogy.
Yeah, now the layers of balancing are like immense.
Correct. Yeah. And a part of that is that at its core, we think that the solo self-found experience is one of the best parts of Last Epoch, because you're never reliant on party or group play in order for your character to have that consistent progression, right? We're willing to respect your time and not make you like make it a group effort every time, right? And so to balance around that is a very tricky thing, because no one has done that yet. So we it's not like we can look at a different game and say, well, that's how they did it, because nobody has taken the solo experience, balanced their game, and then put multiplayer into it and made it work really well. There's been a lot of companies that have tacked that on and it just kind of hasn't worked. But like with an ARPG, it's a totally different world, right? Like, there's always the conversation of, do you drop loot as a group? Do you drop loot like instance based on the player, right? Do you make...
Well, there's a few.
Do you need to roll? Do you need to, like, there's lots of ways to talk about that.
Diablo 2, Grim Dawn, you know, they've done it. You're trying to do something different from them, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I mean, there's also lots of other systems to think about, right? We were a solo self-found game, so there was no social system. Like, there was no join a party, attach to a party, transition between teams and parties. But now let's even talk about this one. Think about the end game. Think about monoliths, right? When you go to a monolith, it's very hyper-focused on the decisions that you make.
Individually,
Right. But rewards are also based on your decisions, because you're choosing the branches in which rewards fall. And so you can kind of create problems for yourself there. That's a hurdle to solve.
Instanced decisions.
Correct. Well, but then on top of that, if you're a group, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're in a party and you're following somebody else's monolith tree, right? You're only getting the rewards that they're like triggering, essentially, right?
Because you're not hunting for the same item, right? It's going to be rare. So that's okay. Hey, personal question. This has nothing to do with like anything.
Sure.
If you were the only person in charge of 11th hour games and you had to drop a cycle, you had to, and it was either a D4 was launched, or D4 season was coming soon, or a PoE league was launching soon, which one would you go against?
Oh, a D4 season for sure. If they're going to follow the exact same format as their previous one, I still think that Path of Exile seasons are more impactful, but I also don't know. So if I'm only guessing at what Blizzard has done previously, right, I think that the impact on a D4 season will be less than the impact on a Path of Exile season. So I'd rather go up against a D4 season. Even though their advertising and their marketing might blow me out of the water, the actual physical amount of content that you may need to digest, that isn't, you know, I don't know if it's stuff's going to be behind a paywall, right? But I'm only using DI as an example.
Is it Blizzard? It's going to be.
If it looks like that, then I'd rather go up against that, because it seems like there's a week plus of content for you to digest, and then you're like, okay, cool, I'll come back.
And Blizzard will likely screw up, so it's perfect.
See, I actively want Blizzard to succeed. I genuinely want
D4. Win.
I genuinely want D4 to be one of the best ARPGs to ever come out and blow my socks off, and I want to play a whole bunch of it and really like it. Like, as much as people think that this needs to be like some fight, like, the people at EHG, myself included, are all big ARPG fans. Like, literally, they almost didn't hire me because they were like, we don't know if you play enough ARPGs, right? There will be employees that are like, I'm taking time off because D4 launched. And we're okay with that. No one's going to be like, boom.
People on this podcast that do that.
Correct. The point that I'm saying is I might be one of those people. Who knows? I might be like, okay, well, I'm going to take this very specific June 5th date off, and then like the 5 days preceding that.
I got the sickness that week.
Right. I mean, I'm just saying, when Path of Exile 2 launches, I got the sickness again.
You just want to be in the pie. You just want to be a slice of the pie.
I've got my last question for you, okay?
Okay.
And it's not like I've been saving it. It's not like ooh, we're going to get him.
You brought this up yesterday.
No. So there has been some criticism too that the last communication talking about major content update. So basically the breakdown of what's coming for multiplayer. Content has different definitions to different people. We all know that.
Sure.
But normally when it comes to ARPGs, content would mean like a new dungeon, a new skill, a new class, a new end game mechanic, a new something to do. And really when you're looking at like a major content patch, we all know that we're getting improved visuals, we're getting improved combat, we're getting fonts, we're getting NPC, we're getting art, we're getting enemies, we're getting multiplayer, we're getting like a refreshed LE. But to the person that has 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 hours into the game, technically when it comes to major content patch, when you log into 090, it will feel like a different experience, but you'll still be doing the exact same thing with something new. So I am kind of hoping that when those, like when you're talking about the surprises that people don't know about, I am truly hoping that it'll be something, I don't know, something different that people can do.
Sure, I see what you're saying. Well, I am going to squash the rumor mill right then. None of my surprises are any content.
Okay.
So marketing is not hiding behind any new content that hasn't already been talked about, right? Let's make sure that everyone is on exactly that same page.
But I guess my question is, 11th Hour Games is marketing 090 as a major content patch, and some would argue that it isn't. So that's really my question.
Sure. So let's talk about one of the things that I like to preach about Last Epoch is how much it respects your time, right? And you made a really good point. You've got 1,000+ hours in Last Epoch, right?
1,600.
I would arguably say that those are probably 1,600 like well spent hours, or at a minimum maybe like 1,400 of those, right? Where you're like, there's stuff, and I did stuff, and I had a really good time doing stuff.
For sure.
So, Aaron, how many hours does Rich have in Last Epoch?
He's got over 3,000.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is if the guy with 3,000 hours looks at me and says, "Why aren't you putting out more content?" I'm gonna say, I mean, you've devoured more content than most humans ever devour in a single object in most lifetimes, right?
Correct.
And so I'm gonna look at you and say, maybe this content patch isn't for you, because I can't give the guy who's got 3,000 hours more content before I finish this other stuff, right?
Right.
And a part of that comes too from if you've got that much time in our game, and being completely honest, then you've seen a lot of iterative changes.
For sure.
Right? Like you've honestly seen from when some of our enemies were a half dozen polygons with purple on them, you know what I mean? To like now, I mean, fully fledged, awesome looking things. And so there's a certain amount of jaded, right? Where like you're like, no, I've been fighting that enemy for the last 1,200 hours. Yeah, but that enemy's looked 16 different ways.
I will agree. The enemies through the eras have increased, especially
or things like
skill difficulty and
the skill effects, the actual skills. I mean, all of those things. And so my answer to that is that if you are one of those players who is 1,000+ hours into our game, and you say there's not enough content, or that doesn't constitute a content patch for me, I'm just going to be honest and say, then you may have to wait a little bit longer. Like this next 090 patch may not be the big content dump you're looking for, because this next content patch is designed around the idea of creating a smooth, equitable, enjoyable multiplayer experience, right?
Yes.
Right.
And when I'm talking about smooth, I'm talking about like how many times have you played a game that is advertised multiplayer and the multiplayer just hasn't worked? Like, you can't join parties. You crash constantly in those parties.
Wilson, Lords of May.
No, hang on. We go even away from the ARPG genre. I'm a Modern Warfare fan. You know, my buddies and I jump in and we say, "Where are we dropping, boys?" a couple of nights a week, right? And like the most recent Modern Warfare 2, I'm sorry, guys. Like, if you're listening and you're upset at me right now, that social interaction is abysmally bad.
Oh, but the campaign's good, though, right?
Oh no, it's still abysmally bad. It's like 12 clicks to get into a part. Like you got to put effort into getting in a party, and then it drops constantly. And when you drop, you can't rejoin. Like it's just sorry, you're SOL.
Is it 8 unnecessary clicks?
It's it should be 2. I should click the social menu. I should see my friends. I should click the guy and be able to invite him.
Right.
Instead, it's like 4 menu trees, and then it doesn't work. You know how I invite people? I like have to open Steam's menu and invite them just via the Steam.
Yeah, that's
thing.
terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah,
Just
that works better than the in-game. Correct.
Please don't
So
do
the point
that.
I'm
For the love of
making-
God.
Right. No, God, no. So the point that I'm making is that like designing social, like you should have a friends list. You should be able to click. They should join your party. They should appear next to you in game, right? They shouldn't have to start at the beginning of a zone and run to you, right? You should be able to drop a portal and they should like show up next
to each
to
other.
like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's the kind of like content iteration that we want to have those quality of life features and not put them behind a paywall either. But we want those quality of life features.
Well, that brings me to a question. You said not behind a paywall.
Mm-hmm.
We've been told that essentially the game will have no DLC, and is there still no plan for that? And not including MTX like skins and animals and pets and whatnot.
So I'm going to be honest and say I don't know that I've ever heard them say there will never be DLC.
They've said that. They've said they never want to.
They never
I might believe you. It could have been years ago. And
Yeah.
It was years ago.
11th Hour Games has come out and said that they never want to split the community. So like, oh, you have the DLC and I don't, so we can't play together. So
no Grim Dawn stuff.
I believe is still true. Meaning we would never want to put out a piece of content that would somehow split a community away from you not being able to participate in content.
Fair enough.
That I believe is true. 100%.
In terms of DLC, like Grim Dawn has Crucible, which is single player like
arena
mode.
I know what Crucible
Could there
is.
be something like that in Last Epoch?
If to make sure that I'm talking the same language, if I remember right, you bought the Crucible DLC.
It's like $4, $5.
Yeah. It was real cheap. But like, if they didn't have it, they couldn't play with you in Crucible, right?
So yeah, they couldn't play in Crucible, but Crucible is more about you trying to get better gear through going through waves.
Sure. No, the problem is we have that. It's arena, right?
Yeah, arena is a you
that's
built
technically
that into
true.
it.
Yeah. And so I understand the example that you're using, and the answer I think is no. Like I think we very clearly kind of said internally, like if we're going to add something like arena, it's just a part of the game, right? Like it's just that we're not going to.
That's fair,
like,
and
take
it's
a chunk and put it behind a paywall.
Which you've done so far. Like the game's not released, and you've already done that.
What do you mean?
Technically, arena still is in the game. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were saying put something behind a paywall. I was like, no, we didn't. Yes, correct. No. Like every time we released a new dungeon, it's not like that dungeon's going to be its own DLC. It's in the game.
Yeah. So take note. Didn't have to pay $5 for that.
Steve, just
right. Well, and I will
Daft,
go on
you got
record
something?
saying there will be no pay to win in Last Epoch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daft, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not going to walk that back later and say,
No,
I'm
go
really
ahead.
sorry, nobody told me.
You good?
In my
question.
interview
Okay.
process said I wouldn't work for them if they were making a pay to win gotcha game. Like I just flat out was like, I won't come work for you.
Right.
And-
I don't see that coming from 11
Everybody
hours
loves
in.
gotcha. Hey, Steve. So 8.
pets.
So I said it was my last question, and we're already over time, but this is just so good. We're going to go over for a few minutes. If that's okay with you, you're good on time.
Oh yeah, I'm fine. My kids are asleep.
Oh,
I'm
fine.
fine.
Right.
Mine
Not
aren't.
yet.
Mine keep coming in the door. Anyways, you know,
Entering the hours myself.
Hello,
You know,
Mia.
that's who come in. Follow me down the
was
rabbit
me,
hole for a
wasn't it?
second. So you get 084, best update, best patch, best everything's excited. Million videos, streams, 8,000 players. Every day it was going up. You get 085, people aren't as happy because 084 was almost so good. All right. Then you jump, leapfrog to 090, almost a year. You get a content patch that really does polish and make the game better, but there's still no actual end game improvements. And then technically EHG has come out and said that no end game will come until 1.0. So whenever 1.0 launches, as far as what you are doing is the exact same from 084.
I can't say that that's true.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that you're wrong, but I
That's
can't
fair.
say that that is true.
Well, so 085 gave us Arena Champions and did give us 2 new dungeons. So I guess you could say from 085 even though it was small, to 1.0.
Let's also be clear, not every patch can be that big. Like, just to be blatant, right? Like, you will, no matter what happens, you will have the this patch wasn't as good.
And this isn't even a question. I guess it's just somebody like me that loves the game. It's my #1 game. I'm always pushing it. I ask these questions because I care. I guess I just, I always worry about the future of the game. If it's like, hey, 085 is basically the game in its completed state with the exception of multiplayer and the polish. From everything that has been released, that is where we're at, which is fine. But
let me tell you that internally we have discussed numerous times about making sure that content is released and consistent so that we have quality stuff to bring people back to want to play, right?
Okay. So
that's the point of games as a service or a living live operations game.
Brings me in.
The living entity that the games are these days.
We've got Rich in, and myself. Obviously, you heard me on last podcast. It's been over a year with the exception of the few who are on CT. No one has new content, and that's a real long time.
It is. Yep, and it's a bit of a field pad. Like, honestly,
right?
Like, that's a landmine. You're in the middle of a landmine right now.
But again, and Steve, I get it. You can't say anything, and I don't want to end like this. But technically, there hasn't been content in that long, and at least communicated from 11th Hour Games, there's been nothing saying that there will be new content, with the exception of three masteries for 1.0. So I guess that's kind of what I'm getting towards.
Yeah,
it's important to note that, like, when we do say that something is a thing, we intend for that to be a thing. So whether it happens then or it happens later, like, it is intended to happen. And if it doesn't happen, we usually just say it didn't happen. The issue comes, and this was like all the way back to the first thing I said tonight, right? Was that, like, in January, February-ish, right, was really when I think you probably correct me if I'm wrong. I was going through, like, a lot of transitional stuff in my own life, like moving over to EHG, was when the Tencent information came around, and when we dropped a major and we dropped a major patch, right? So there was a lot of changes that happened, and then with that we were like, great, like, some of that money that's being used is going towards, like, hiring internally for people to come on. If anyone here has ever been in a growth environment, right? Like, for a fact that training people to also do your job means you're not doing your job, you're just training other people, right?
Like, you can't do both.
Correct. There is a period of time where it was like, we have a lot of new people and we're training them and getting them up to speed, and
That's fair.
And so there were months of, like, us, like, getting back to a working machine, because we went into this build back up phase, and along with that is culture, right? A business has a culture. Whether people want to admit that it exists or not,
it does. It does.
Right. And that culture actually lends into working, and you end up working in what's called, like, bonded groups, right? You and the people you work really well with usually kick ass at your job. I'm allowed to swear here, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're good.
We keep it small on our end, but yes.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you get into that working flow and you start to really excel, but that takes usually months to, like, figure yourselves out, figure your workflow out, figure out who you report to, how you report to them, like, how you can interject, right?
Right.
Because a lot of times you're, like, finding ways to do that. And that takes a certain amount of management skill. It takes a certain amount of people skills, and not everybody has those. And so sometimes you learn things like, this guy's not good at giving other people work, and we need to figure that out, right? So with, like, interpersonal growth. And so the answer there is, honestly, for a period of time, the company was just in growth and stand-up phase, right?
Right.
And so during those times, we were very dead about communication, period. And then we were like, okay, we're ready to communicate again. We got a lot of decisions we have to make about things that we're doing. And another part of that is there are also more people at the table whose decisions are valid. Right.
So
and that's
the growth is
working scenario as well.
So the growth obviously has been one of the growing pains with the
It
team.
has.
They're
That is a
having to
normal
learn to work together, get your schedules together, that whole vibe. So that you could contribute that to the slowdown of the pacing of the game. Everybody's like, wait, okay, let's not all play a solo ball. We got to kind of get
is a couple of months ago, maybe even longer, we really started to like get back into our stride. And since then, we've ramped up considerably, like how well we're able to do all of the things that we're doing. And so that confidence is back, which is why you've got things like dates now and promises and what we're going to achieve.
So
yeah,
that leads into a question I do have about, and you previously told me you couldn't really talk too much about this, but your agile working environment. I'm not asking you like what your versioning software is. Although later on I may. But like, how are you?
Our agile guy might be super happy to talk to you about that.
Oh, I may be. I may need to talk to him. Just for personal reasons. But so obviously you guys are like 100 plus. And for those of you that don't know what agile working is, it's chaos incarnate. How are you? How are you keeping everything, I guess, organized in a 100% agile environment?
So the first part being is agile is a loose term because, as you've said, agile is a bit chaos incarnate, right?
Yeah.
And different teams are using different workflows. Like development team is using your standard sprint model, right? Yeah. Here's what we're working on. Here's the sprint we're working on. Here's all the things we want to get done in that sprint. Let's work on it, right? And so different teams at the company are currently using different models of work.
Okay.
My marketing actually doesn't work very well in an agile environment unless you're already in live ops service. When you're in pre-planning, like you need to have a more structured environment of this is what we'd like to do. Here's what we're going to build towards. Here's how we're going to get there, right? Agile doesn't work when you're just like trying to be more flexible.
Right.
Once you get to live service, you have to move to agile. You have to be able to pivot on a dime.
Yes.
At pretty much any point, because somebody could do something ridiculous and make your life miserable if you don't.
Yeah. Well, people need to do the same thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And so that is a part of it. Like one of our project managers internally is helping digest all of that across various departments, and we have different project management styles for each of those departments, because like sprint methods don't work well for marketing groups. Like that's not like how it works, and putting sprint into marketing is a little bit weird, right? And so I wouldn't go to the dev team and be like, hey, I'm gonna adopt your model to my model. So in terms of our workflows, I mean, I can talk at an extremely high level. Like we use GitHub, obviously, for a lot of our development-based stuff. We use Discord interpersonally for like all of our inner working communication. There's a number of like software suites we use to basically stand up and deliver.
Would you be using like Perforce or Plastic or any of those?
I'm not going to go that far, unfortunately.
Okay,
I can give you that we use Discord to communicate and GitHub. And
try.
Like after that, I don't know how much internally my teams would want us to, because there are deficiencies in those, and I don't want to tell you which things that you should have.
That's why I'm asking.
Look at you, sneaky guilty.
Like, I am actually in email debates with Plastic right now.
Hey, Steve, have you ever played Spriggan before?
What is Spriggan?
Inside of.
Are you talking about like the morph from the
Druid?
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
You had me talking about like workforce things, and my brain went to like, that's not a working type I'm familiar with.
No. Totally fine. Totally fine.
What's friggin' fired instantly? Get him out of here. Yeah, actually, I did. What was the Poison Vine Whips build a couple months ago?
Very nice.
Yeah, I was having a lot of fun with that. There
was a question that I didn't ask from the community, and I saw Quiet in chat, because maybe this question came from Quiet, who has 6,000 hours in the game and has multiple uniques that he's put in.
You should send me a screenshot of that if you genuinely have 6,000 hours like on your Steam thing. Like I want to see it, because I feel like we should have like we should like award whoever currently has like the most. Like that would.
Yeah, send that to us too while you're at it.
Yeah, it's a nice.
Yeah, if you send them if you send it to them, they'll get it to me. But like, I'm curious because like Judd plays an insane amount of Last Epoch.
We could put it on our Discord. We could put.
I'd be curious to know if somebody has like more played hours than him. Now, let's be clear: if you're just like turning it on and falling asleep, no dice. Get out of here.
No.
Question from
walk away, go to the store.
Question from Quiet is: there's only one mastery in the game that does not have a movement skill. It is Spriggan, and it's his favorite class.
It's a good class.
And I know you're not a developer, Steve, but just thought you should know that Spriggan, if EHG doesn't do anything about it, will be a class that will not be playable in multiplayer because it does not have.
With the Spriggan is an
it doesn't have a movement skill.
So that works too.
But you got an underground crawly skill. That would be sweet.
The Spriggan is Swamp Thing, and Swamp Thing can go anywhere he wants at any time.
Could do that.
And they should do that. It's a warp mechanic.
I like the underground crawly.
I don't hate the idea. I don't hate the idea of basically like a swamp walk or like a shadow walk for the Swamp Thing. I'm digging that vibe.
Quiet.
I also
I asked your question. I just want to know, Quiet. I did it for you, but. So Steve knows.
To answer that, yes, you are correct. Whether or not that exists in the world is not up to me. But I can go put a bug in Mike's ear and say, hey,
please.
Supposedly this is the thing that's going on. And he'll tell me, yeah, we know, and he'll give me whatever.
Just tell him to read.
True.
The Alan Moore
Quiet has told Mike probably 500 times. So I hope when Mike goes back and watches this, he's going to be like,
and I won't be saying it to
he'll
Mike.
be like, Quiet, Spriggan movement.
And Judd.
First thing in the morning.
Mike's probably messaging me right now, like, don't you dare.
He said he's going to watch this.
Say it to him 3 times.
He said he's on baby duty. He's going to watch this tomorrow. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
This podcast is normally 90 minutes. We went a little bit over. I think we're good. Daft, Guilty, you guys good questions-wise?
We're good. There's a lot of cool information we got.
My main question.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, Steve, just want to say really
fun.
Thank you for coming and spending time with the community. Everybody that came and watched, thank you for interacting and asking great questions. You know, and I said this at the beginning, we didn't go out to 11th hour games. We didn't say, hey, we want to get a guest. Steve watched our last podcast. We had a lot of criticisms based upon the announcement for 090 being pushed back March 9th, and he reached out and said, hey, I want to be a part of it. I want to be able to answer some of those frustrations. And you've been a good sport. And he came out and said that potentially the trade dev blog will be out this week. Potentially. Which I take as definitive. So that's the way it is.
Nailed it.
Steve, I'm going to give you the final word. When you give me the thumbs up, we're done.
How long should I sit here? Like, is this
as long as you want? Go on.
It's usually thanks.
Read a book.
Whatever.
Read Gatsby.
Don't read a book, but you get the final word.
I'll say good night, and then we'll call it good.
Done.
Excellent.
I got the final word.